The transformation of ancient Rome's rural foundations ranks among history's most compelling narratives. In this exploration, we delve into how fiscal pressures and administrative reforms reshaped the traditional landscape of agriculture and society. Rome's system evolved under the weight of taxation and public obligation, gradually changing relationships between free peasants and landholders. What began as voluntary tenancy eventually morphed into a tightly bound servitude known as the Colonate. This process was not an overnight change, but a gradual evolution influenced by diverse factors ranging from military conquests to economic necessity. Municipal decurions and Roman administrators enforced regulations that tethered everyday citizens to the very soil they farmed. Marking a shift from autonomy to obligation, the emerging system became a lifeline for an empire struggling to manage vast territories, and yet it exacted a heavy toll on the peasant class. This narrative offers both a cautionary tale and an insightful window into how societies adapt under pressure. With clarity and an accessible approach, our journey will trace the roots of the Colonate across multiple regions, from the storied banks of the Nile to the lively landscapes of Italy. We will unravel the interplay between state policy and local life, revealing the human stories behind legislative decrees. Through creative storytelling and a careful examination of historical context, we invite you to explore an era where survival, adaptation, and resilience defined every day on the ancient frontier. This introduction sets the stage for an engaging and thoughtful journey into a transformative past. To truly appreciate the evolution of the Colonate, it is essential to first understand the underlying structure of the Roman agrarian system and its social hierarchy. The Roman countryside was a complex network where farming communities, municipal authorities, and tax collectors intermingled, in a system designed primarily to benefit state coffers. Land was not merely a source of livelihood. It represented status, power, and a means to generate revenue for both local administrations and the central government. In numerous towns, local leaders known as decurions were responsible for tax collection and other civic duties. These decurions, often drawn from the property-owning class, found themselves increasingly squeezed by the demands of administration and military expenses, an imbalance that trickled down to the common people. Citizens and the municipal plebs, once free and autonomously managing their farms, gradually saw their independence diminished as the state imposed heavier fiscal duties. The transformation began slowly, as successive governments introduced measures that inadvertently weakened the traditional role of the independent peasant. Gradually, legal instruments and fiscal strategies emerged that tied tenants more firmly to the lands they once cultivated voluntarily. This process was not uniform but varied across the empire, with each region adapting its local customs to new state-imposed regulations. The agricultural system was evolving into a more stratified structure, where property on one side accumulated as large estates or latifundia, and on the other, free peasant labor was increasingly supplanted by bonded labor. It became evident that the pressures of the Roman fiscal system had a dual effect. While they generated the necessary revenue for an ever-expanding empire, they also eroded the traditional bonds between landowners and laborers. Ultimately, the struggle to balance public necessity with private rights sowed the seeds for a social system where obligations often overpowered freedom, setting the stage for the Colonate to become a widespread phenomenon. By examining the intricate balance between fiscal imperatives and agricultural practices, one can see that the transformation in Roman society was driven by both policy and economic realities. At the heart of the system, local administrations struggled to meet the ever-growing demands imposed by Rome's expansion. Efforts to secure state income led to stricter enforcement of taxation and labor contracts. As a result, the bonds between the peasant and the land were legally reinforced, and local customs were overridden by imperial mandates. This development changed family life, reshaping daily life with impact. In Egypt, the transformation of rural society took on its own distinctive flavor. Under the earlier Ptolemaic rulers, village communities operated under a system known as the idia. In this structure, every eligible villager was required to contribute personal services, including working on royal lands that were not designated for contract cultivation. This system ensured that the state's extensive agricultural resources were fully utilized, and that communal responsibilities remained strong. When the Romans assumed control, they refined and intensified these existing practices, binding villagers even more firmly to their land. With the Roman administration, the concept of the idia became a powerful tool for enforcing labor and tax obligations. Every resident was expected to participate in the cultivation of both private and state lands, with strict requirements during critical periods, such as sowing and harvest. The cumulative pressure of heavy taxation and obligatory labor forced many peasants to abandon their traditional freedoms and ties to the land. Over time, significant tracts of state land remained uncultivated due to the exodus of overburdened peasants. At the same time, private estates grew larger as a direct result of state policies that encouraged the exploitation of wastelands. As the government sought to meet fiscal demands, it transferred responsibilities to local municipal councils. These councils, comprising property holders, were tasked with collecting taxes and ensuring that agricultural production met state quotas. In doing so, they prohibited tenant peasants from leaving their allocated plots. This policy was a turning point that solidified the peasants' status as colonos, tied inexorably to the soil. In effect, what was once a voluntary system of cultivation evolved into a system of compulsory labor and fiscal control, laying the groundwork for what can be seen as early serfdom. The transformation in Egypt was both a reflection of Rome's need for increased agricultural output and a method to reinforce state authority over vast rural landscapes, thereby influencing the social fabric for generations to come. Egypt's unique experience under Roman rule demonstrates a creative fusion of inherited traditions and imposed regulations. The practical enforcement of labor duties not only ensured state revenue, but also created a community where every villager's role was meticulously defined. This careful balancing act reflects the empire's broader challenges, where administrative precision met long-standing cultural practices, ultimately giving birth to a new social order that resonated deeply within Egyptian society. In Asia Minor, the seeds of transformation were sown as the region experienced a shift from Hellenistic traditions to Roman administrative practices. Under the Seleucid legacy, royal lands were extensive and managed by local systems that prioritized the Old World order. Once Rome assumed control, these lands were reclassified as public domains, and their management came under a new, centralized authority. Over time, vast tracts of these territories evolved into the imperial estates that shaped the local economy. In this new configuration, local Greek cities maintained a degree of self-governance, yet the overlay of Roman fiscal policy began to reshape the daily lives of ordinary citizens. Village communities, once free to manage their own affairs, were gradually transformed into units by fixed obligations. The Roman administration insisted that residents, much like in other regions, perform set duties on the land, ensuring that every inch of territory was cultivated and taxed. This melding of Greek local customs with Roman legal imperatives produced a unique system where the concept of the idia became synonymous with civic duty. The imposition of such responsibilities was not merely an economic maneuver, but a socially transformative act. The intricate system of liturgies and obligatory services left its mark on household structures, interweaving state control with everyday family life. Even as aristocrats and local elites retained certain privileges, the common people found themselves increasingly confined by legal contracts and fiscal demands. As Asia Minor integrated into the broader imperial framework, its agricultural production became a critical component of Rome's wealth. In effect, local farmers were transformed from voluntary agrarians into dependable state tenants, their labor secured by contracts that mirrored those in other provinces. This region, blending rich cultural heritage with practical Roman governance, stands as a testament to the enduring impact of administrative evolution on society's fabric. Asia Minor's journey highlights the creative clash between tradition and innovation. Local customs merged with Roman legal frameworks to forge a new identity while still respecting ancient practices. Farmers, town officials, and community leaders all played a part in this dynamic process, adapting to new rules while preserving familiar ways of life. These changes not only boosted state revenues, but also altered human connections and responsibilities across the region. In Africa, the evolution of the Colonate followed a distinct pathway that underscored the region's dynamic interaction with Roman imperial policies. At the onset of the Principate, lands outside newly established municipal jurisdictions were classified either as ager publicus or allocated as private estates belonging to Roman senators. Under early emperors, notably Nero, significant transfers of private estates occurred through legacies and confiscation, progressively shifting control to the princeps. This accumulation of land was accompanied by innovative administrative reforms that redefined agricultural management across the continent. Imperial procurators divided vast tracts of land into large districts, each containing multiple estates managed under a uniform system. Tenant contractors, known as conductors, leased these estates and, in turn, sublet portions to local tenant farmers, the Coloni. An edict issued by a procurator named Mancia set clear guidelines, stipulating that the Coloni were required not only to pay a fixed portion of their crop as rent, but also to dedicate a specified number of days working directly on the land of their leaseholder. This system encompassed both residents with small plots from neighboring villages and those who, though initially free, had moved onto the estates. In search of stability, Emperor Hadrian introduced measures aimed at expanding peasant land ownership, allowing coloni to occupy idle lands while maintaining obligations to the state. Yet despite these progressive reforms, forced labor obligations persisted, provoking discontent among the peasantry. The resulting practices effectively bound the colony to the estates, transforming them into serf-like figures. Over time, as more middlemen transitioned from mere tenants to de facto proprietors, the state adjusted policies to ensure that every cultivable piece of land remained in production. This evolution in Africa was characterized by a delicate balance between state control and private initiative, a balance that reflected both economic necessity and the administrative genius of Roman governance. Ultimately, the African experience demonstrates how fiscal pressures and pragmatic reforms converged to forge a system where agricultural labor became inextricably linked to land tenure. This transformation not only secured the empire's tax base, but also redefined social structures. The intricate arrangements between conductors and colony ensured that agricultural production remained productive, even in challenging times. The policies implemented in Africa highlight the ingenuity of Roman administration as they balance the demands of expansive imperial rule with the realities of everyday farming life. These reforms created lasting echoes through agricultural and social history in Africa. In Italy, agricultural transformation unfolded along different lines compared to other parts of the empire. The land was dominated by expansive latifundia, vast estates originally operated with slave labor. However, as economic conditions shifted, these estates increasingly relied on free tenant farmers. Over time, the supply of cheap slaves diminished due to manumissions and reduced foreign conflicts, prompting a gradual substitution with free colony. This change in labor dynamics marked a turning point in how estates were managed and how peasant labor was conceptualized. Fiscal necessities increasingly dictated that even voluntarily established tenant arrangements became permanent bonds. State intervention, driven by the need to secure tax revenues from untended lands, forced property holders to incorporate nearby small farms under their control. Legal measures ensured that these tenants could not leave, effectively binding them to the estate as serfs. The transformation of the coloni in Italy was thus a gradual evolution, shaped by economic pressures and reinforced by legislation. These new arrangements forever altered the traditional fabric of Italian agricultural society. Grand estates and small holdings became intertwined in a system where profits increasingly depended on the stability of labor. The human cost was significant, as families lost the independence they had once enjoyed on their ancestral lands. Despite occasional reforms aimed at liberating free peasants, the rigid demands of fiscal policy and large-scale estate management often prevailed. The evolution witnessed here provides a vivid illustration of how economic imperatives can reshape social norms and individual lives. In a society deeply connected to its land, the shift from voluntary tenancy to bonded servitude in Italy left an indelible mark on its cultural and economic legacy, with repercussions that would echo through later centuries. This dramatic shift reconfigured social bonds, altered generations' expectations, and forever transformed the Italian rural landscape in profound ways. Agricultural practices under the Roman system left an enduring imprint on both society and the economy. The imposition of heavy fiscal obligations reshaped community structures and redefined the relationship between the land and its cultivators. As state administrators increasingly relied on fixed contracts and labor quotas, free peasants were bound into a system of obligation that resembled serfdom. This transformation led to practical changes in farming methods and social interactions, as the secure yet oppressive terms of tenancy limited innovation and stifled agricultural initiative. The deliberate tying of individuals to specific lands served to stabilize tax revenues, while also constraining personal freedom and social mobility. Over time, the cumulative effects of these fiscal policies resulted in population decline, reduced birth rates, and a growing number of abandoned fields. Once thriving communities gave way to large, overseen estates that depended on a workforce compelled to remain in place. This arrangement, though effective in generating consistent revenue for the state, ultimately eroded the potential for a robust, independent peasantry. The consequences were far-reaching, directly influencing the economic vitality of rural areas and contributing to long-term shifts in cultural attitudes toward land and work. The Roman model of enforced labor has since resonated as a cautionary tale, highlighting the delicate balance between state control and individual liberty. Although reforms were attempted at various points in history, the weight of fiscal necessity frequently prevailed, ushering in an era characterized by stagnation and lost initiative. Today, the echoes of these policies can be observed in the historical challenges faced by subsequent agrarian systems throughout Europe, offering insights into the complex interplay of economy, policy, and social structure. This analysis not only emphasizes the transformative impact of state policies on rural life, but also serves as a reminder of the challenges inherent in balancing authority with freedom. The transformation from free peasantry to a system of bonded coloni across the Roman Empire was a complex evolution driven by fiscal necessity and state ambition. Each region, from Egypt and Asia Minor to Africa and Italy, experienced its own unique journey toward enforced agricultural servitude. These changes reshaped societies, redefined labor relations, and left legacies that influenced later historical developments. Reflecting on these processes offers valuable insights into how governmental pressures can alter lives and social structures over time. The story of the Colonate remains a powerful reminder of resilience amid economic transformation. History continues to learn from it.